The sun hung heavy in the afternoon sky, a bright coin pressing down on the city park. Dust swirled in lazy circles above the cracked pavement path. Most people hurried past, eyes fixed on phones or the next appointment, shoulders tense with the day's wait. But on a weathered green bench, near the old oak tree, sat Mr. Arjun. He wasn't in a rush. His world had slowed to the pace of his own quiet heartbeat. His hands, knotted like old tree roots, rested on his knees, holding a small, untouched paper bag of peanuts. His eyes, clouded with years but still sharp, watched the children playing far away on the rusty swings. Their laughter, bright and carefree, floated towards him like distant music, a sound he could hear but never quite touch. Arjun remembered when his own laughter filled a small house. He remembered the tiny hands tugging his shirt, the sound of his daughter's voice singing off-key in the shower, the warm weight of his wife's hand in his. That house felt like a dream now, faded at the edges. The silence after they were gone, first his wife to illness, then his daughter to a life across the ocean, was a physical thing. It sat in his chest, cold and heavy, especially in the empty rooms of his small apartment. Coming to the park was his ritual, his only escape from that silence. He'd sit for hours, a quiet observer of a world that seemed to move too fast, too loud without him. The peanuts were for the sparrows, a small act of giving when he felt he had so little left to offer. But today, the sparrows stayed away, perhaps sensing the deep quiet around the old man, a quiet that felt more like loneliness. A sudden gust of wind snatched the paper bag from his loose grip. It tumbled, fluttering like a wounded bird, across the path. Arjun flinched, a small gasp catching in his throat. He started to rise, but his stiff knees protested, and the effort felt suddenly immense. He sank back, watching helplessly as the bag rolled towards a little girl who had stopped, her skipping rope. She couldn't have been more than 6, with dark pigtails bouncing and eyes wide as saucers. She stared at the scattered peanuts spilling onto the ground, then looked up at Arjun. Her expression wasn't pity, which he dreaded, but pure, uncomplicated curiosity. Without a word, she skipped over, gathered the loose peanuts with small, careful hands, and placed them gently back into the torn bag. She held it out to him, her small face serious. "For the birds?" she asked, her voice clear as a bell. Arjun nodded, unable to speak past the sudden lump in his own throat. He managed a small, shaky smile. The girl didn't leave. Instead, she plopped down on the very edge of the bench, not too close, but not far away either. She pointed to a bright blue butterfly dancing near some daisies. "Look, it's wearing sky," she declared. Arjun followed her finger. He saw the butterfly, yes, but mostly he saw the wonder in her eyes, the pure, unburdened joy of noticing something beautiful. It was a feeling he'd forgotten he could have. They sat like that for a while. The little girl chattered softly about butterflies, about how the clouds looked like a sleeping dragon, about her cat named Whiskers. Arjun didn't say much. He just listened. He watched the way her hands moved when she talked, the way her nose scrunched when she concentrated. He felt the stiff, cold weight in his chest begin to soften, just a little, warmed by the simple act of being seen, of being spoken to, not at. It wasn't about fixing the past or filling the empty house. It was about this moment, this small, unexpected connection on a dusty park bench. The loneliness didn't vanish, but it shifted, making space for something else, a fragile thread of warmth. When the girl's mother called her name, she jumped up. "Gotta go. Bye, Mr. Peanut Man," she yelled, already running, her pigtails flying. Arjun raised a hand in a slow wave, the smile still lingering on his face, feeling real for the first time in months. He looked down at the paper bag in his hands. He didn't feel the urge to scatter the peanuts immediately. Instead, he carefully folded the torn edge, making it neat. He watched the sparrows finally descend, pecking at the scattered nuts. The girl hadn't gathered. The park sounds, the distant traffic, the other children's shouts, the rustle of leaves didn't feel like noise anymore. They felt like life, humming all around him. He took a deep breath, the air tasting different, cleaner. The heavy sun didn't feel like it was pressing down. It felt like it was gently holding him. The walk home later wouldn't feel like a retreat into silence. It would feel like carrying a small, warm ember back with him. He knew tomorrow might still hold the quiet ache, the empty chair at the table. But today, a little girl with pigtails in a paper bag had reminded him that he wasn't invisible. The world hadn't forgotten him. There was still beauty to see, shared in a glance, a handful of peanuts, the fleeting touch of a small, kind hand returning what the wind stole. As he slowly pushed himself up from the bench, his knees still stiff but his step a fraction lighter, Arjun didn't just see the path home. He saw the possibility of tomorrow's bench, and maybe, just maybe, the chance to share a story of his own. The loneliness was still there, but it wasn't the only thing left. Hope, small and bright as a butterfly, had landed softly on his heart. The next morning, Arjun woke not to the familiar, heavy silence of his small apartment, but to the faint, hopeful echo of a child's voice. Look, it's wearing sky. Sunlight, pale and gentle, touched his window. He moved slowly, carefully, as if the fragile warmth he'd carried home yesterday might shatter. But it didn't. It lingered, a quiet hum beneath his ribs, replacing the usual cold ache. He made tea, the simple ritual feeling different, not a lonely chore, but a small act of care. He looked at the neatly folded paper bag on his table, the one the little girl had mended. Today, he bought 2 bags of peanuts. The park felt transformed. The dust motes danced like tiny stars in the morning light, not just dirt. The rusty swings didn't seem broken, but full of the memory of laughter. Arjun sat on his usual bench, the old oak a comforting presence. He didn't just watch the world, he saw it. The determined way an ant carried a crumb, the soft green of new leaves against the rough bark, the way an elderly woman carefully fed crumbs to pigeons, her movements slow and kind. He felt less like an outsider looking in, and more like a quiet part of the park's gentle rhythm. He opened the first peanut bag, scattering nuts for the sparrows. They came quickly this time, chirping their thanks. He kept glancing towards the path where the little girl had appeared. Hope was a nervous bird, fluttering in his chest. Would she come back? He didn't expect it, not really. But the wanting was new. It felt alive. An hour passed. A man walked his sleepy dog. Children ran to school, backpacks bouncing. Arjun watched them, a softness in his gaze he hadn't felt in years. He remembered his daughter's school days, the frantic mornings, the proud wave goodbye. The memory didn't stab him today. It warmed him, like holding a smooth stone warmed by the sun. Then, he saw her. Pigtails bouncing, skipping rope clattering on the path. His heart leapt, a surprising strong beat. She spotted him instantly, her face lighting up like a lamp. "Mr. Peanut Man," she yelled, running over, not stopping until she was right beside the bench. She didn't sit this time. She danced a little jig. "I told Mama about you," and Whiskers, and the sky butterfly. She plopped down, breathless. "Mama says hi." She pointed to a woman standing a little way off, smiling gently, holding a book. She gave Arjun a small warm nod. Arjun's throat tightened. He managed a nod back, then looked at the girl. You told her?" His voice was rough, unused, unhung. She chirped, already focused on the sparrows. "She says you're nice and lonely." She said the word plainly, without judgment, like stating the weather. "But not too lonely now, right? 'Cause of the peanuts and the birds and me." The simplicity of it, the lack of shame in her words, struck him deep. Lonely. He'd carried that word like a hidden shame, a burden only he felt. But she said it like it was just a fact, like his shoes being brown. And then she'd added, but not too lonely now, as if loneliness could be measured and shared and made smaller. He opened the second bag of peanuts. "For you," he said, his voice steadier, "to help the birds." Her eyes widened. "Really, for me?" She took the bag carefully, like it was treasure. "I'm Maya," she announced, pouring a small pile into her palm. The sparrows hopped closer, unafraid. She giggled as one pecked gently at her fingers. Arjun watched her small face, alive with concentration and joy. He saw her mother watching them, a quiet understanding in her eyes. He didn't feel invisible anymore. He felt seen, accepted, just as he was, the old man with the peanuts. Maya stayed for nearly an hour. She told him about Whiskers chasing a leaf, about the dragon cloud she'd seen that morning, about how Mama read stories with funny voices. Arjun listened, truly listened. He didn't just hear the words, he felt the lightness in them, the uncomplicated wonder. He found himself smiling, a real smile that reached his eyes and eased the lines on his face. He even spoke a little about the old oak tree being his friend, about how the sparrows were the park's busy postmen. Maya listened seriously, nodding. When she finally jumped up, called by her mother, she didn't just run. She turned, held out her hand, and placed one perfect, untouched peanut in Arjun's palm. "For later," she whispered, then skipped away, waving wildly. Arjun closed his hand around the single peanut. It was warm from her small fingers. The weight in his chest wasn't gone. The empty chair at his table, the quiet apartment, the years of loss were still real, but it wasn't a cold, heavy stone anymore. It felt different, softer, like a stone wrapped in moss, held gently. It was a space that could hold other things now. The memory of Maya's laughter, the warmth of her mother's nod, the simple trust in a shared peanut. He didn't rush home when Maya left. He sat, watching the sparrows finish the feast. He noticed the park wasn't just for escaping loneliness anymore. It was a place where connections bloomed, small and bright as daisies. An elderly man walked by, pushing a worn stroller. Arjun met his eyes and gave a small, slow nod. The man nodded back, a flicker of recognition passing between them two. Travelers on the quiet path of aging. It was a tiny thing, but it felt huge. Walking home later, the afternoon sun felt kind, not oppressive. The city sounds, the distant hum of traffic, the chatter from a cafe, weren't noise pushing him away. They were the sound of life happening around him, and he was part of it. He carried the single peanut in his pocket, a tangible reminder. Tomorrow, he would come back. He wouldn't just wait for Maya, he would hope for her. And maybe, just maybe, he would say more than hello to the man with the stroller. The loneliness hadn't vanished, but it had company now. It shared the space with a quiet, stubborn hope, the hope of a small hand placing a peanut in his palm, the hope of a shared glance, the hope that even the deepest quiet could be filled, one small, bright moment at a time. The path home wasn't an end, it was a beginning, paved with the soft, warm promise of tomorrow's bench. The following Tuesday, Arjun woke before the sun, not to silence, but to a quiet hum of expectation. He dressed slowly, choosing his softest gray sweater, the one his wife had knitted years ago. He didn't just pack 2 bags of peanuts today. He added a small, clean cloth napkin. The park path, usually just cracked concrete under his worn shoes, felt different beneath his feet. Each step held a gentle rhythm, like a heartbeat syncing with the world. The air smelled of damp earth and distant rain, clean and new. He arrived early, the park still hushed, dew glistening on the grass like scattered diamonds. He sat on his bench, the old oak's shadow stretching long beside him. He didn't scan the path anxiously. He simply waited, the napkin spread neatly. On the bench beside him, holding the 2 peanut bags. The sparrows hopped near his feet, chirping softly, as if sharing a secret. He heard the skipping rope thwack 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 before he saw her. Maya came running, pigtails flying, her face bright with a secret. She skidded to a stop, breathless. "Mr. Peanut Man, look." She thrust out a small, grubby hand. Nestled in her palm wasn't a peanut, but a smooth, gray stone, worn by water, shaped almost like a tiny heart. "I found it just for you, by the river with Mama." Her eyes shone with pure pride. Arjun's throat tightened. He took the stone gently. It was cool and solid, real in his palm. "It's perfect, Maya," he managed, his voice thick. He placed it carefully on the napkin beside the peanuts. "Thank you." Maya didn't sit immediately. She pointed to the napkin. "Why the cloth?" she asked, tilting her head. "For sharing," Arjun said simply. He opened one peanut bag and poured a small pile onto the cloth, so the peanuts don't get dirty. "For us, and the birds," Maya beamed, like a tablecloth. She plopped down, not on the very edge this time, but closer, her small shoulder almost touching his arm. The simple contact sent a warm ripple through him. She carefully arranged a few peanuts on the cloth table, humming a tuneless song. "Mama says you talk to the trees," she whispered, glancing at the old oak. Arjun smiled, a real easy smile. "Sometimes they listen well, better than people, sometimes." He looked at the tree. This one, he's seen many seasons, many happy days, many sad ones, like me. Maya nodded seriously, as if this made perfect sense. "Does he tell you stories?" "In his way," Arjun said. "The wind in his leaves. It sounds like whispers, about children who climbed him, birds who nested here, sunshine and storms." He picked up the smooth stone Maya gave him. "Like this stone, it tells stories of the river." Maya's eyes widened. She picked up a peanut and held it close to her ear. "Can peanuts tell stories?" Arjun chuckled, a sound he hadn't heard from himself in years, warm and low. Maybe this one is about a sunny field, or a busy squirrel." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching sparrows hop onto the cloth table, pecking delicately at the peanuts. Maya gently nudged one peanut aside for a shy bird. Arjun watched her small, careful movements. The heavy loneliness that used to sit in his chest like a cold stone wasn't gone, but it had changed. It wasn't a wall anymore. It was more like an empty room. And now, in that room, sat a small, warm stone, a cloth napkin full of peanuts, and the sound of a child's quiet humming. It wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting. Suddenly, Maya shivered. A cool breeze had picked up, carrying the promise of rain. Arjun noticed her thin cotton dress. Without a word, he slowly unbuttoned his soft gray sweater. He held it out. "For you," he said, his voice gentle. "The wind is strong." Maya looked surprised, then nodded. She slipped her arms into the sleeves, which hung far past her hands. She rolled them up clumsily, giggling. The sweater was huge on her, but she looked cozy, wrapped in the quiet kindness of it. She snuggled closer to Arjun, her small head resting lightly against his arm. He felt the warmth of her through the thick wool. He didn't move. He just let the small, trusting weight of her be there. He looked down at her, her eyes half closed, watching the sparrows. A deep, quiet peace settled over him, deeper than he'd known in years. It wasn't the absence of sadness. It was the presence of something else, a simple, profound connection. He wasn't just remembering happiness. He was feeling it, right here, in the rustle of leaves, the shared warmth of a borrowed sweater, the quiet companionship on a park bench. Later, when Maya's mother called her, Maya scrambled up. She carefully rolled down the sleeves Arjun had adjusted and handed the sweater back. Her mother approached, a kind smile on her face. "She talks about you constantly, Mr. Arjun," she said softly, "about the stone, the tree stories, the peanut table." She touched Maya's head. "Thank you for seeing her, for seeing us." Arjun just nodded, unable to speak. Maya hugged him quickly, a small, fierce squeeze around his waist. "Bye, Mr. Peanut Man. See you tomorrow. I'll bring Whisker's favorite toy." She skipped away, the gray sweater momentarily forgotten in Arjun's hands. He held the sweater, still warm from her small body. He carefully folded it, placing it on the napkin beside the heart-shaped stone. He looked at the empty space where Maya had sat. The park sounds, the wind, the distant traffic, children playing didn't feel separate from him anymore. They were part of the same song. The empty room inside him wasn't silent. It held the echo of Maya's giggle, the feel of her small head against his arm, the weight of the smooth stone. The loneliness was still a part of his story, yes, but it was no longer the whole story. It shared the space now with this, the quiet, understanding in a mother's eyes, the gift of a river stone, the borrowed warmth of a sweater, the simple act of sharing peanuts on a cloth napkin, as Arjun slowly gathered his things. Folding the napkin with the remaining peanuts and the precious stone, he didn't feel the usual pull of the empty apartment. He felt the sun, warm on his face. He felt the solid weight of the stone in his pocket. He felt the lingering warmth of a small hand in his. The path home wasn't a retreat. It was a journey, carrying something more. He knew the quiet ache might return on days Maya didn't come. But now he also knew its antidote. The courage to sit on a bench, to spread a napkin, to offer a sweater, and to believe that a single, smooth stone could hold the weight of a new beginning. Hope wasn't a loud shout anymore. It was a quiet hum, a shared peanut, a borrowed sweater, and the certain knowledge that tomorrow's bench would hold more than just silence. It would hold the promise of a skipping rope's thwack, a small hand, and the beautiful, ordinary magic of being seen. The first autumn leaves, crisp and copper-colored, swirled across the park path like shy dancers. Arjun sat on his bench, the old oak, now wearing a crown of fiery red. He didn't wear his gray sweater today. Instead, a small knitted blue scarf. Maya's gift from yesterday, slightly lopsided and smelling faintly of crayons, was tucked carefully in his pocket. He traced the smooth river stone in his other pocket, its cool surface a constant reminder. The air held a new chill, but the usual bite of loneliness was absent. It had been replaced by a quiet, steady warmth, like embers banked low. He heard the thwack-thwack of the skipping rope long before he saw Maya. She burst into view, cheeks flushed pink from the cool air, dragging a small, red wagon. Her pigtails were tied with bright yellow ribbons. "Mr. Peanut Man," she yelled, her voice bright against the rustling leaves. She skidded to a stop, eyes sparkling. "Look, Mama helped me." Inside the wagon sat, not toys, but treasures. A chipped blue mug, a small stack of picture books, a thermos, and a slightly squashed paper bag that smelled wonderfully of cinnamon. "It's a picnic," Maya declared, already unloading. "4 cold days. Mama said you might be chilly." Arjun's throat tightened. He watched her small, determined hands arrange the mug, the books, the thermos. She poured steaming apple cider into the mug, sweet, spicy, and warm. "For you first," she insisted, pressing it into his hands. The heat seeped into his cold fingers, a simple comfort that felt like a lifeline. He took a slow sip, the warmth spreading through his chest, chasing away the autumn chill deeper than any coat could. Maya plopped down beside him, pulling out a book titled The Very Hungry Caterpillar. "Read it?" she asked, her eyes wide. Arjun hadn't read aloud in years, his voice rusty from disuse, but Maya's expectant gaze, so full of trust, melted his hesitation. He began, his voice soft at first, then gaining strength as he remembered the cadence. The silly voices for the caterpillar eating through fruits. Maya listened, utterly still, her small hand resting lightly on his knee. When he finished, she clapped silently, a huge grin on her face. "You're good, better than Mama's funny voices." They shared the cinnamon-scented muffin, crumbs scattered onto the cloth napkin Arjun always brought now. Sparrows, bolder than ever, hopped right onto the bench edge, snatching tiny pieces Maya offered. One particularly brave bird landed near Arjun's hand. He held out a single crumb. The sparrow tilted its head, then gently took it from his palm. Maya gasped. "He likes you." Later, as they watched the bird fly away, Maya grew quiet. She picked up the river stone Arjun had placed on the napkin. "Mr. Peanut Man," she asked softly, tracing its smooth curve, "does this stone miss the river?" The question, so simple yet profound, caught Arjun off guard. He looked at the stone, then at Maya's serious face. He thought of his wife, of his daughter across the ocean, of the years filled with silence. "Sometimes," he said slowly, his voice thick with unshed tears. "But it found a new home, a good home, where it's seen." He touched the stone gently. "Like me." Maya didn't say, "I'm sorry." She just nodded, understanding in her young eyes. She placed the stone back in his hand, closing his fingers around it. "It's happy here," she stated firmly. Then, as if to prove it, she scooted even closer, resting her head against his arm again, just like before. The simple weight of her, the warmth of her small body, was an anchor. The old ache for his lost family was still there, a familiar hollow space. But now, nestled right beside it, was this new, tender warmth, the shared cider, the sound of a child's breathing, the feel of a smooth stone in his palm. The hollow space wasn't empty anymore. It held this. A sudden shower began, soft and misty. Maya didn't panic. She just giggled, pulling a small, bright yellow rain poncho from her wagon, clearly meant for Arjun. He helped her put it on first, the plastic crinkling, then pulled his own over his head. They sat under the oak's partial shelter, watching. The rain turned the path silver. Maya pointed out shapes in the raindrops on the leaves. Arjun watched her, the way her nose crinkled when she concentrated, the raindrops catching in her yellow ribbons. He felt a deep, quiet joy, not loud or sudden, but steady and sure, like the old oak's roots. It wasn't replacing the past. It was weaving something new into the fabric of his present. When the rain eased, Maya's mother appeared, holding an umbrella. She smiled at the sight of them, the old man and the little girl, huddled under ponchos, sharing a picnic on a damp bent. "Time to go, sweet pea," she called gently. Maya scrambled up. She didn't run straight to her mother. Instead, she turned back, pulled the blue crayon-scented scarf from her pocket, and carefully wrapped it around Arjun's neck. "For walking home," she whispered. Then, before he could thank her, she darted to her mother, grabbing her hand. Arjun stood slowly, the scarf soft against his skin, smelling of crayons and childhood. He watched them walk away, Maya skipping, her mother's arm around her shoulders. He didn't feel the familiar pull of the empty apartment. He felt the damp air on his face, the scarf's gentle warmth, the river stone solid in his pocket. He looked down at the bench. The cloth napkin was damp, the crumbs gone, but the chipped blue mug sat neatly folded inside the wagon Maya had left behind, a tiny, deliberate gift. He picked up the mug, its ceramic, cool, and familiar. Walking home, the city didn't feel cold or indifferent. He noticed the baker sweeping his step, the old woman feeding cats in her doorway, the steam rising from a manhole cover like a sleeping dragon's breath, things he'd walked past for years without seeing. He saw people. He even gave the baker a small nod. The baker, surprised, nodded back, a flicker of recognition passing between them. Back in his quiet apartment, Arjun didn't rush to turn on the radio to fill the silence. He placed the chipped blue mug on his windowsill, where the afternoon sun caught it. He took off the blue scarf and laid it gently over the back of his chair. He placed the river stone beside the mug. The room wasn't silent. It hummed with the echo of Maya's laughter, the taste of apple cider, the soft thwack of a skipping rope. The loneliness hadn't vanished, but it was no longer a vast, empty ocean. It was a quiet bay, and into that bay, A small, bright river had begun to flow, bringing warmth, connection, the gift of a child's trust, and the simple, enduring magic of being known. As he sat by the window, watching the autumn light fade, Arjun knew the bench tomorrow wouldn't just hold him. It would hold the promise of shared stories, cinnamon muffins, and the sound of a little girl's voice declaring, "Look, we're in sky." The world hadn't forgotten him. He was finally remembering how to belong to it again. The first snow fell softly, turning the park into a quiet world of white lace. Arjun sat on his bench, the old oak tree wearing a delicate crown of snow. He wore the blue scarf Maya had given him, its crayon scent faint now, but still a warm hug. Around his neck, his hands, wrapped in worn gloves, held not peanuts today, but two small cloth-wrapped bundles. The cold air nipped his cheeks, but the familiar heavy silence was gone. It had been replaced by a quiet hum of belonging, like the steady beat of a heart learning to trust again. He heard the thwack-thwack of the skipping rope cutting through the hush of snow. Maya appeared, bundled like a bright berry in a red snowsuit, her pigtails peeking out from under a knitted hat. She wasn't alone. Walking beside her, holding her mittened hand, was a man Arjun didn't recognize, tall, with kind eyes, and a gentle smile that reminded Arjun of Maya's mother. Behind them trudged a small fluffy white dog, leaving tiny paw prints in the snow. "Mr. Peanut Man," Maya yelled, her breath puffing like smoke. She ran ahead, the dog bouncing beside her. "Look, I brought Benji, and this is Papa." He came back. Her voice held pure, uncontainable joy. Arjun's heart squeezed. Papa. He remembered the quiet absence Maya's mother carried sometimes, the way her eyes would grow distant. He looked at the man. "Welcome home," Arjun said softly, his voice thick with understanding. The man nodded, his eyes warm. "Thank you for keeping my girls company while I was away." He squeezed Maya's shoulder. Maya plopped down, Benji curling at her feet. "Papa brought real hot chocolate," she announced, unpacking a thermos and 3 small cups from her wagon, the same red wagon, now dusted with snow. The hot chocolate was rich, sweet, and steaming, smelling of chocolate and vanilla. It warmed Arjun right down to his toes, a deep, comforting heat. Maya chattered about Benji learning tricks, about Papa seeing snow leopards way up high, and about how Mama was baking gingerbread cookies right now. As Maya poured more chocolate, Arjun carefully unwrapped one of his cloth bundles. Inside lay a small, smooth wooden bird, carved with simple, loving strokes. He'd spent weeks shaping it, remembering the birds his own father carved for him as a child. "For Benji," Arjun said, placing it gently in Maya's hand. "So he has a friend in the snow." Maya gasped, her eyes wide. "It's perfect." She immediately tied a bright red string around its tiny neck and tied it to Benji's collar. The dog wagged his tail, utterly confused but pleased. Arjun then unwrapped the second bundle. It held a single, perfect peanut, polished until it shone like a tiny brown jewel. He held it out to Maya's father. "For the journey home," he explained quietly, "a small token for finding your way back." The man took the peanut, his throat working. He didn't speak for a moment, just held the simple seed, its smoothness, a quiet promise. "Thank you," he finally said, his voice rough. "It means more than you know." He placed it carefully in his coat pocket, right over his heart. Later, as the snow fell thicker, Maya grew quiet. She leaned against Arjun, her small body warm against his side. Benji slept at their feet. The park was silent except for the soft shush of snow and the distant city hum. Maya traced a pattern in the snow on the bench. "Mr. Peanut Man," she whispered, when Papa was gone. The bench felt too big, like the quiet was too loud. She looked up at him, her eyes serious. "But you were here. You made the quiet, okay?" Arjun felt a lump rise in his throat. He remembered his own vast, echoing silences, the unbearable weight of empty rooms. He placed a gloved hand gently over Maya's small, mittened one. "Sometimes," he said softly, "the quiet isn't empty. It's just waiting for the right sound." He nodded towards her father, who was watching them with a soft smile, like waiting for a papa to come home. Maya nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. She snuggled closer, the shared warmth a silent language. Arjun looked at the snow-covered path, the sleeping oak, the man who had returned. The ache for his own lost family was still a familiar echo, a soft sigh in his chest. But it no longer filled the space. Now, that space held the warmth of Maya pressed against him, the rich taste of shared hot chocolate, the quiet strength of a father's return, the gentle thump of Benji's tail. The loneliness hadn't vanished. It had simply made room for new connections, new joys, new reasons to feel the sun, even a winter one, on his face. When it was time to leave, Maya didn't skip away. She stood before Arjun, her small face earnest. She took off one of her bright red mittens and pressed it into his hand. It was soft, slightly damp from her warmth, and smelled faintly of gingerbread. "For your hand," she said, "so it doesn't get cold walking home." Then, with a quick, fierce hug that squeezed the breath from him, she ran to her father, grabbing his hand. Benji followed, the wooden bird swinging gently from his collar. Arjun stood slowly, the single red mitten cradled in his palm. He watched them walk away, a small family unit, against the vast white park. The man's arm around his wife, Maya skipping between them, Benji trotting happily. The cold air stung his cheeks, but inside, a deep, quiet warmth spread. He slipped the red mitten onto his left hand. It was far too small, the fingers barely covering his knuckles, but it was warm. It held the imprint of Maya's small hand, the scent of gingerbread, and the fierce, uncomplicated love of a child's gift. Walking home, the city wasn't cold and indifferent. He saw the baker shoveling snow with a smile, the old woman feeding birds with her grandson, the steam rising from the manhole cover like a friendly dragon's breath. He nodded to the baker, who nodded back, a shared understanding passing between them in the winter hush. The empty apartment awaited, but it didn't feel empty. He pictured the blue scarf over his chair, the river stone on the windowsill, the chipped blue mug. Now, he would add the tiny red mitten. Back inside, Arjun didn't turn on the radio. He stood by the window, watching the snow blanket the sleeping city. He held the red mitten gently. The silence wasn't silent at all. It hummed with the thwack of a skipping rope, the rich smell of hot chocolate, the soft thump of a dog's tail. The echo of Papa came back. The loneliness was still a thread in the tapestry of his life, yes, but it was no longer the only thread. Woven through it now were strands of bright red mittens, shared thermoses, wooden birds, and the profound, quiet joy of knowing you are seen. You are remembered. You are part of the story. As the snow continued to fall, painting the world white, and new Arjun knew the bench tomorrow wouldn't just hold him. It would hold the promise of small hands, warm mittens, and the beautiful, ordinary miracle of a family, whole again. The world hadn't forgotten him. He was home, right here, in the quiet warmth of being known. The first daffodils pushed through the thawing earth, bright yellow suns against the park's soft green carpet. Arjun sat on his bench, the old oak now dressed in tender new leaves. He wore the blue scarf loosely around his neck, the tiny red mitten tucked safely in his pocket like a secret treasure. Spring air, warm and smelling of wet soil, filled his lungs. The heavy silence that once lived inside him was gone, replaced by a quiet, steady rhythm, the sound of belonging. He held not peanuts today, but a small, clay pot filled with rich, dark soil and 3 plump, promise-filled seeds. He heard the familiar thwack-thwack of the skipping rope, but slower now, mixed with the excited thump-thump of Benji's tail. Maya appeared, dragging her red wagon, but her face held a new kind of seriousness. Her pigtails were neatly braided, and she wore a small, hand-stitched apron over her dress. Behind her, Benji carried a tiny, muddy shovel in his mouth. Maya's mother walked close, her hand resting gently on the shoulder of a little boy Arjun hadn't seen before, Maya's younger brother, Rohan, his eyes wide and shy. "Mr. Peanut Man," Maya called, her voice hushed with importance. She stopped before the bench, placing the wagon down with care. "We brought help." She pointed to the clay pot in Arjun's hands. For the bench, Arjun looked at the pot, then at Maya's earnest face. "Seeds?" he asked softly. "Sunflower seeds," Maya declared, kneeling beside the bench. She carefully took the pot. "Mama said your bench is the best spot for watching things grow. Like us." She glanced at Rohan, who hid slightly behind his mother's skirt. "Rohan's scared of birds," she whispered loudly, "but Benji protects him." Arjun smiled, his heart swelling. He looked at Rohan. "Birds are shy too," he said gently, "like little boys meeting new friends." Rohan peeked out, a tiny smile touching his lips. Maya got to work. With intense concentration, she dug 3 small holes in the soft soil, her small fingers working the earth. "One for you," she said, placing the first seed. "One for me." The second seed went in. "And one," she paused, looking up at Arjun with eyes full of quiet understanding, "for the quiet that used to be here. So it grows into something warm." Arjun's breath caught. He remembered the vast, cold emptiness that had filled him, the silence that felt like a prison. Maya, in her simple, profound way, had named it, not as an enemy, but as soil waiting for seeds. Tears pricked his eyes, but they were warm tears, not cold ones. He placed a gentle hand on her head. "Perfect," he whispered. As Maya patted the soil over the seeds, Rohan cautiously approached. He pointed a small finger at the clay pot. "Flowers?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Big, happy flowers," Maya confirmed, beaming. "Taller than Benji, and they'll turn their faces to the sun, just like we do." She scooted over, making space on the bench edge for Rohan. Hesitantly, he sat, his small body tense, but curious. Arjun didn't rush him. He simply sat quietly, the shared warmth of the spring sun on their shoulders, the soft sounds of the park bird song, distant laughter, Benji's happy panting, wrapping around them like a blanket. Later, Maya pulled out a small notebook and a stubby pencil. "Mr. Peanut Man," she said, "will you tell me about your sunflowers? When you were small?" She opened the book to a page already filled with her wobbly drawings. A stick figure man, Arjun, a little girl Maya, a dog Benji, and a huge, smiling sunflower. Arjun hadn't spoken of his childhood garden in decades. The memory of his father teaching him to plant seeds, the scent of warm earth, the pride of watching green shoots push through, it had been locked away with the deeper pain of loss. But looking at Maya's open notebook, and Rohan listening quietly beside him, the words didn't feel like stones in his throat anymore. They felt like seeds, ready to be planted. He began softly. He spoke of the tiny patch behind his family's old house, of the way the sunflowers bowed their heavy heads in the evening, of his daughter planting her first seed at age 4, her tiny hands covered in dirt. He spoke of the joy, yes, but also, for the first time, he spoke of the quiet ache after they were gone, the garden left untended, the seeds forgotten. His voice didn't break. It simply carried the truth, like the earth carries the seed. Maya listened, her pencil moving slowly, drawing a small sunflower beside his words. Rohan leaned closer, his earlier shyness replaced by rapt attention. When Arjun finished, Maya closed the notebook gently. "Your sunflowers are still growing," she said with absolute certainty. "Right here." She tapped the clay pot on the bench, then touched Arjun's chest, right over his heart. "And in the park, because you told me." The simple gesture, The child's unshakable belief filled Arjun with a profound warmth. The old grief wasn't erased. It was woven now into something richer, something that included this moment, this connection, this small hand touching his heart. The loneliness hadn't vanished, but it had transformed. It was no longer a barren field. It was fertile ground, where new stories, new connections, could take root and bloom. When Maya's mother called them home for lunch, Rohan didn't run. He stood up and, with great solemnity, placed one small, smooth acorn he'd found into Arjun's hand. "For the bench," he mumbled, then scurried to his mother's side. Maya hugged Arjun tightly, the scent of earth and sunshine on her clothes. "Water the seeds tomorrow, okay? They'll be thirsty," she called as she skipped away, Benji bouncing beside her, Rohan waving shyly from his mother's hand. Arjun sat alone on the bench as the afternoon sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges. He held Rohan's acorn, cool and solid. He looked at the clay pot, the dark soil holding its quiet promise. He touched the blue scarf at his neck, felt the red mitten in his pocket. The park wasn't just a place he visited anymore. It was a part of him, and he was a part of it. He saw the elderly man with the stroller wave as he passed. Arjun waved back, a real smile on his face. He saw the baker's daughter chasing butterflies. He gave her a small nod. Walking home, the city streets felt alive with quiet connection. He didn't rush. He stopped to watch sparrows flit between budding trees, just as he'd taught Maya. He felt the sun on his face, the acorn in his palm, the memory of small hands placing seeds in the earth. His apartment awaited, but it wasn't a retreat. It was a home filled with the echoes of laughter, the scent of crayons on a scarf, the weight of an acorn, and the quiet hum of 3 sunflower seeds waiting in the soil. He placed the clay pot carefully on his sunny windowsill, right beside the river stone and the chipped blue mug. The room wasn't silent. It held the rustle of new leaves outside, the distant chirp of birds, the imagined sound of seeds stretching in the dark earth. The loneliness was still a thread in his story, yes, but now, woven brightly through it, were threads of tiny hands, shared seeds, acorns of trust, and the deep, quiet certainty that even the most barren ground could bloom again. As he watered the seeds with a small cup, Arjun didn't just see dirt. He saw tomorrow's tall, golden faces turning towards the sun, a living testament to the quiet magic of being seen, remembered, and deeply, simply loved. The world hadn't just remembered him. It had planted him firmly back in its heart. The summer sun blazed, turning the park path into a shimmering ribbon of heat. Cicadas sawed their endless song in the oak trees. Arjun sat on his bench, the old oak, now a giant umbrella of deep green. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but the familiar, heavy silence was long gone. It had been replaced by a steady, warm hum, the sound of a heart finally at peace. He wore the faded blue scarf loosely, a habit now, and beside him sat not peanuts, but a small woven basket filled with ripe, sun-warmed strawberries. The air smelled of hot grass and promise. He heard the thump-thump of small feet long before he saw them, not skipping rope, but the determined pattering of tiny shoes. Maya appeared, but changed. Her pigtails were gone, replaced by a neat braid. She was taller, her face holding the soft roundness of early motherhood, and in her arms she carried a little girl, perhaps 2 years old, with Maya's bright eyes and a fistful of dandelions. Behind them walked Maya's husband, Ben, carrying a small cooler. Benji, older now, but still fluffy, trotted faithfully beside them. "Mr. Peanut Man," Maya called, her voice warm with a new kind of joy. She carefully settled the little girl on the bench beside Arjun. "This is Lily. Lily, say hello to the man who taught me about sky butterflies." Lily stared at Arjun wide-eyed, then shyly offered him a dandelion puffball, its seeds ready to fly. Arjun's throat closed up. He remembered the first peanuts, the river stone, the red mitten. Now a dandelion? He took it gently, the fragile stem cool in his weathered hand. "Hello, Lily," he whispered, his voice thick. "It's a beautiful sky butterfly seed." Lily giggled, a sound like tiny bells. Maya sat down, placing the cooler between them. "We brought strawberry ice cream," she said, unpacking small cups and spoons. "Just like the hot chocolate, but for summer." The ice cream was sweet, tart, and impossibly cold, melting instantly in the heat. Lily smeared hers happily on her chin. Arjun watched Maya wipe her daughter's face, the gesture so tender, so familiar, a mirror of the care he'd once given his own daughter. The old ache for his lost family surfaced, gentle now, like a familiar melody, but it didn't drown out the present. It blended with it, a bittersweet harmony. Maya pointed to the far corner of the park. "Look." 3 towering sunflowers, their golden faces turned proudly towards the sun, stood exactly where they'd planted the seeds years ago. They grew so tall, Mr. Peanut Man, just like you said. She smiled, her eyes holding the quiet understanding of time past, of seasons changing, of life continuing. Later, as Lily dozed against Maya's shoulder, sticky-fingered and content, Maya grew quiet. She looked at Arjun, really looked at him, the way she had when she was small. "You know," she said softly, tracing the rim of her ice cream cup, "when I was little, this bench was where the quiet felt loudest, where I missed Papa the most." She glanced at Ben, who was gently tossing a ball for Benji. "But you didn't try to fill the quiet with noise. You just sat in it with me, made it safe." She placed her hand over his, the one holding the dandelion stem. "You taught me that quiet isn't empty. It's where you hear the important things." Arjun felt tears well, warm against the summer heat. He remembered the crushing silence of his apartment, the unbearable weight of absence. He'd never known his quiet presence could be a gift, a shelter for another lonely heart. "You taught me something too, Maya," he said, his voice rough but steady. "You taught me that loneliness isn't the end of the story. It's just soil, waiting for the right seeds." He nodded towards Lily, now awake and poking Benji's nose. "Like these." Lily wriggled free and crawled onto Arjun's lap. She didn't speak, but her small hand patted his cheek, sticky with melted ice cream. Then, with solemn concentration, she placed a single, perfect strawberry, the one Arjun had saved for her, into his palm. "For," she declared, pointing to the sunflowers, "Big F.O." Arjun closed his hand around the cool, red fruit. He looked at Lily's trusting face, at Maya's peaceful smile, at Ben watching them with quiet gratitude. The vast cold emptiness he'd carried for so long wasn't gone, but it had transformed. It wasn't a hollow cave anymore. It was fertile ground, rich and deep, where memories of the past intertwined with the vibrant life of the present. That loneliness had made space for Maya's childhood wonder, for Benji's loyal thump, for the taste of shared strawberries, for the weight of a grandchild on his lap. It held the echo of his wife's laughter alongside Lily's giggle, the memory of his daughter's hand within the sticky grasp of this new small one, when it was time to leave. Maya didn't skip away. She helped Lily down, then knelt before Arjun. She took his hands, the one holding the strawberry, the one holding the dandelion. "Thank you," she said, the words simple, but carrying the weight of years. "For everything. For the bench." She pressed a small, smooth seashell into his palm, Lily's latest treasure, found at the beach, for Lily to remember. Lily hugged his neck fiercely, leaving a sticky kiss on his cheek. "Bye, Sky Man," she chirped, skipping towards her father, who scooped her up. Arjun sat alone as the late afternoon sun slanted through the oak leaves, painting the bench in dappled gold. He held the seashell, cool and pearly, and the dandelion puffball. The park buzzed with life, children shouting, birds calling, the distant hum of the city, but the noise felt like music now, not an intrusion. He saw the elderly man with the stroller wave. Arjun waved back, a deep smile reaching his eyes. He saw the baker's granddaughter chasing butterflies. He gave her a small, encouraging nod. Walking home, the heat was still intense, but it felt different. It felt alive, vibrant. He didn't rush through the streets. He stopped to watch sparrows bathe in a puddle, just as he'd shown Maya years ago. He felt the sun's warmth on his skin, the seashell's smooth curve in his pocket, the phantom weight of Lily in his arms. His apartment awaited, but it wasn't a retreat into silence. It was a home filled with light. Inside, he placed the seashell carefully beside the river stone and the chipped blue mug on his sunny windowsill. The room wasn't silent. It hummed with the memory of Lily's sticky fingers, the taste of sun-warmed strawberries, the sound of Maya's quiet thank you, the imagined rustle of dandelion seeds catching the wind. The loneliness was still a thread in the tapestry of his life, yes. But now, woven brightly through it, were threads of sticky grandchild hugs, towering sunflowers, seashells of gratitude, and the deep, enduring truth that love, once given, echoes through generations. As he watered the small potted sunflower seedling on his sill, a cutting from the park giants, Arjun didn't just see a plant. He saw roots reaching deep, leaves turning towards the light, a living testament to the quiet, resilient magic of connection. The world hadn't just remembered him. It had welcomed him into its ever-unfolding story. A story where even the oldest bench could cradle new beginnings, and the sweetest fruit was always shared. He was home, not just in his apartment, but in the warm, beating heart of the world itself.